right, Daniel Jeremiah is here, NFL Network. Los Angeles Chargers Move the Sticks podcast, one of my favorite podcasts on earth. And I always say this, like, people say, hey, what podcast you listen to? I say, I listen to the podcasts where I can't get that perspective. And it's Bucky Brooks and it's Daniel Jeremiah, and it's two guys who have a scout's outlook that I'm just in a million years not going to replicate. So I'm a huge fan. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Oh, it's great to see you. I've told you many times, one of my absolute favorites, and I am actually, my philosophy is I just want people that can make me smarter, and you always have smart conversations. And I've told you this, and I think I say this every time I come on here, so I might as well just keep the streak alive. But you're the best interviewer. You're the best interviewer in the period. So I enjoy your conversations and your questions.
Okay.
I've given you football.
Sure.
But I think I'm shortchanging you. I want to expand it beyond that.
I agree. Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. There might be some great hockey interviewer out there. I don't follow hockey. So, who knows?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, the number one hockey podcast is hosted by Paul Bissonnette, who just fought 6 guys at once. I don't know if you saw the story.
I saw that story, but I didn't know who he was, but that's crazy.
Yeah, well, he's got a very good hockey podcast. So I'm definitely not the toughest interviewer if we're including hockey podcasts. But other than that, maybe, listen, you mentioned Oprah's on notice. All of the great question askers are on notice now, according to Daniel Jeremiah, and that's fine. All right, we're going to start here. We have a lot to get to. Who's going to end up being the best quarterback in the 2024 draft class? I'm interviewing you at 2030, and I'm saying, DJ, let's rank them. What are we going to be saying?
To me, it's dependent on who gets the Chicago job, just because I do feel like Caleb is the most talented. I still feel that way, felt that way coming into the process, and we've seen it. I think if you took, the best 50 plays of all these guys, you would still feel like Caleb's the most talented. But who gets that job? Can they support him with the necessary pieces, particularly up front? That's kind of that's to be determined. So if I was going to take the safe route, I think the marriage between play caller and quarterback in Denver is probably the best. And it's going to be Sean Payton's not going anywhere. So that voice is not going to change. In Washington, it's worked beautifully with Jaden Daniels, but I don't know how long Cliff's going to be there. Does he have an opportunity to go be a head coach somewhere else? Does he have, at the NFL level or the collegiate level, if he wants to go back into that world? I don't know. I think there's a little more uncertainty in these other spots and these other situations. I love Drake May and what he's doing. He was my second quarterback going into the draft process. I think what he's done is the most impressive, considering who he's doing it with. Mm-hmm. But again, I don't know. I don't know what that future looks like in terms of who they're going to surround him with.
So with Caleb, you mentioned, all right, so it comes down to who they hire there. Is there a name where you're saying, all right, this is going to work here, or is it a type of coach? Is it a type of coach who's going to let him do a certain thing? What would that be?
I think it's just stability and someone who gets him and doesn't. And I could give you 10 offensive coaches that would make sense. I think the biggest issue with Caleb has been, and it's not just being a defensive coach, but I think it was the messaging of the don't screw up style of play, of just beat it into them. Do not turn it over. Don't be reckless. Play on schedule. Be like, this is who you are. So we got him paralyzed in the pocket, taking sack after sack after sack, instead of just freeing him up and saying, hey, this is who you are. We want you to be that. We're going to live with some of the mistakes because the good's going to so far outweigh the bad. But don't be something you're not. That's who you are. Now it's on us to, put you in positions and with players and different situations to protect you from yourself, but do not alter your aggressiveness. I thought they kind of took his stinger away. And I think most offensive coaches, have the opposite philosophy in that regard.
I thought he was playing with hesitation. And I also think that it was the worst thing to happen to him because he's the type of player, as you know, he makes things happen in the pocket. He steps up, he steps to his left. Mm-hmm. And I think he was trying to clock NFL speed the first month of the season, and he was playing hesitantly. So he didn't know, like, you'd see plays where he's playing a step slow, and he's like, oh, I didn't know that they were this fast in the NFL, because you don't know. You cannot replicate NFL speed. So it all came out awkwardly in September and in October. And I felt like Shane Waldron and Matt Eberflus did nothing to get him playing confidently.
Yeah, I think it completely. To me, it was a combination of a lack of trust and an infusion of fear. It's not trusting these guys are going to be where they're supposed to be, and if it goes wrong, it's on me. It's my ultimate responsibility is do not make mistakes. So, I mean, and then even as an anticipation thrower, he can't throw with anticipation. I've seen him throw
Mhm.
with anticipation, but it was just like, I don't know, is he really coming out of it right now? Like, I don't know. I just not a lot of trust there. So I think that's all gotten better. It's all gotten better as we've gone throughout the year. And that's what's encouraging to me. So in terms of who's the ideal candidate, insert solid
Yeah.
offensive minded coach. That's all I'm looking for.
Is that if you're Ben Johnson, what job would you try to take?
So my Ben Johnson take is a little different than everybody else here. My Ben Johnson take is I don't. It would be like I want to say stalking. Maybe that's not the right word. I don't want to ever see anybody get fired.
Okay.
But if I'm Ben Johnson, I'm keeping an eye on Cincinnati and going. I would rather stay in
Ooh.
Detroit and wait 2 years, 3 years for that opportunity to open up. Because if you want to take what I've done to another level, the only quarterback who could run this stuff that I'm doing better than Jared Goff is the guy in Cincinnati.
Might I introduce you, to complicate the scenario, to Mr. Mike Brown, who owns the team and will not be giving Ben Johnson a 5-year, $100 million contract.
I know, but if you're Ben Johnson, again, do
yeah,
you
I
care?
get it. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
know
you could be
exactly
there
what you're saying.
throughout the rest of this guy's career. They go win a Super Bowl,
Yeah.
and then hey, if I miss out on a couple $1,000,000 at the end of my life, is that going to make me drastically different? No.
It's a good thought. It's really good thought. And like we saw Jim Harbaugh, like immediately year one, he gets Justin Herbert, immediate success because he's a good coach. He's got that floor. Speaking of, so you see it firsthand. And I've told a bunch of stories about Jim Harbaugh on this podcast. Told a couple with Schefter 2 weeks ago, but I knew that he was going to have success. I said on every TV show I was on the moment he got hired, they're going to make a Super Bowl in 5 years, within 5 years. It might be earlier than that. I was putting 5 just because I thought they were going to have to take the salary cap medicine, and it was going to take a couple years to rebuild the roster. They're having immediate success now. Why?
I think there's the simple thing is they don't beat themselves. They're going to take care of the bad teams. There's enough wins on everybody's schedule to get to the playoffs. You know what I mean? They're out there. Just take them. And he does. And I saw some of the criticism. Oh, they haven't beaten the teams with the winning record. And they solved that a little bit with Atlanta last week. But just beat the teams that if every team that they've played where the talent has been equal, or even they've been a little bit close underneath the line, they've won. Now, there's going to be times like the Ravens game. You watch that game, and I'm like, okay, they're right there. They had a lead. It was a one-score game. The Ravens have a better roster than they do. And if the teams with better rosters play a clean game, I don't care how great of a coach you are, you're going to have a tough time. But he's going to get this team to the playoffs just by handling his business. Yeah. They don't, and this is the other side of it. He is an excellent teacher. Everybody talks about motivation. To me, put the motivation to the side. It's teaching. He is an excellent teacher. They don't turn the ball over. They don't blow protections. They don't bust coverages on defense. That's a combination of having himself and a staff full of good teachers. And to me, one in a league built for parity where you have, the rules set up for everybody to be equal. One of the great ways that I've seen some of the better teams differentiate themselves in the last couple of years is intelligence. They have a bunch of smart players, and that goes right in line with we're not going to lose games. We're going to let you screw up, and we're going to take the plays that are there, and we're going to capitalize. When you do bust a protection, when you do bust a coverage, we're going to strike.
There's a great moment in Seth Wickersham's book where he talks about how Belichick early on was playing against Jimmy Johnson. So I think this was when Jimmy was in Miami, and he was giving advice to Belichick on the field pregame. And Jimmy said the secret of the NFL is when there was 30 teams. The secret of the NFL is 24 teams get out of your way. They just get out of your way. They're going to be awful. They're not going to, just be in those 6. And to me, when you mentioned like letting teams beat themselves, not make mistakes, there's enough wins on your schedule. To me, the Chargers have always been in the 24 teams that get out of your way. And Jim Harbaugh has put them in the 6 or the 8.
I went from the difference. I've done their games for 7 years. I've gone from calling some of the most entertaining losses to calling some of the most boring games. I mean, that's really the best way to summarize it.
Yep, 100%. You mentioned some candidates here, and I'm curious. No one ever talks about this part of it. And what's funny to me, and this is somewhat true of coaching, but there's more outward results on coaching. Like I've met Ben Johnson twice in my life.
Yeah.
And I know he's really smart, but I can also see, even if I hadn't met him twice, You can see the proof is there. You
Yeah,
can see
yeah.
rankings, you can see plays, you can see Penei Sewell becoming an offensive weapon. You can see all of these things. With GMs, it's harder. And I think, as you know, that when you see these lists of future GMs, a lot of times just people who talk to the media a lot, but there's some some stuff going on, okay? But you know so much about scouting. You know so much about front office work. You know so much about, hey, this guy was responsible for this part and who's able to do the XYZ. And so you have a different perspective than people just making lists for whatever website, whatever media website it might be. Give me some people who are not GMs who are going to be great GMs one day.
Oh, it's such a great question. The fascinating thing for me at my age, I'm getting ready to turn 47, is a lot of the guys that I would have had as my kind of staple guys, my top guys, they're all GMs now.
Yep, I was going to say, yeah.
Grew up with. So I'm getting dangerously
Yeah.
close to being out of the loop on this conversation.
Wow.
Whereas the guys in our, how old are you, Kevin?
38.
Okay, so you still have more years of some guys still coming up. But like, I'll give you an example with the Chargers. Chad Alexander, I was with him with Baltimore. Chad, was in the pro department in Baltimore. He goes to the Jets. He's their director of player personnel. Drafted a lot of good players. Obviously, it hadn't worked out there with the Jets.
Yeah.
He comes to the Chargers here with Joe Ortiz. Chad's really sharp. He's going to get an opportunity. He'll get a chance to visit with some teams, I'm sure, in this offseason. Matt Berry's one with Seattle Seahawks, who I kind of came up in the league with. He's been there for a long time. They've been and seen different ways of doing it. But obviously the Pete Carroll, John Schneider tandem for so long there, I think that's a winning way to roster build and to have a, which is the key, is having the same page, situation with coach, GM, alignment, and all those fancy buzzwords that you can use. He would be another one that I would put in there. Mike Bradway's with the Kansas City Chiefs, and someone who's really sharp there. And there's Borgonzi's there. He's been talked about for a bunch of gigs over the years. So there's good candidates out there. It's just, like our kind of crew that I ran with was like, Adam Peters would have been the top of my list for all these years. Is a good buddy, but also someone who I just had so much respect for. And obviously you've seen what he's done hitting the ground running at Washington.
I think everybody thinks, I don't think there's such thing as a super drafter. I think some guys do the process better than others, but even if you look at John Schneider, Ted Thompson, even Ozzie Newsome, you look at some of the, if you look at the results over a 20-year period, they all have down drafts. And I think that it's bared out that you can have guys who are superheroes at building teams, but not hitting on every single draft pick. That just doesn't happen. So a GM is such a all-encompassing job. You work for Ozzie Newsome, you work for Howie Roseman. Can you just explain, I know it's a huge question, but can you just explain what makes a great general manager that we don't think about?
Well, I think the alignment thing is big, but I also think it's understanding where to prioritize.
Yeah.
I always say it. It's like, just from a basic team building standpoint, it's hard to have a great offensive line and be a terrible team in this league. It is. And yet we see time after time of like the people get distracted by the shiny objects, and it's like, dude, the formula is right there for you. It's literally right there. So like Brad Holmes, to me, everybody that's aspiring to be a general manager should study from when Brad Holmes got hired to where they are right now, and the moves and the priorities of the moves that he made. Because I joke with people, about where the Chargers are right now. And I just, like, that's the head of schedule. I'm like, look, and I haven't asked Ortiz about this, but this is the Detroit Lions formula. I mean, you've got your tackles in place, you've got your quarterback in place, you've got your high volume receiver in place in Ladd McConkey. So now the next step going to be for this team offensively is we've got to go find our Jamison Williams for outside speed. We got to go find our Sam Laporta for a difference-making tight end, and we've got to get some juice in the backfield with Jahmyr Gibbs. But like Brad Holmes has put the blueprint out there for everybody. We're going to be competitive immediately as soon as we get the offensive line in a really good spot. We're going to address the defensive line with capital, especially draft capital there with Aiden Hutchinson was kind of a statement pick there. So that to me is kind of getting the right pieces in at the right time. It's a lot easier to add those peripheral pieces once you've got that stability there. But I think, and maybe that's not all under the radar. I would think most even fans would have appreciation for, building the line of scrimmage up first and foremost.
We say that on December 3rd, and then in April, someone takes a guard and they all get all pissed off and they boo and they say, "Oh, we wanted this guy." Like, we say, all fans say they like the process until they see the process. It's funny because I asked Brad Holmes 2 years ago in training camp
Mm-hmm.
about everything. And I said, you tore down. And he said, no. He said, it's like a house. You get a house.
Mm-hmm.
And we just started working on the house. And then we started getting rid of this guy. And all of a sudden, we accidentally had a tear down. We didn't mean it. We just started removing stuff, and then we had a tear down. And he said, so that was the first year, stripping it down to the studs. Second year, you build the house, and you get the HVAC, right? You get the HVAC. You just get the basics. And I love this analogy. He was so animated when he was saying, we're getting the HVAC in, we're getting the ceilings in, we're getting the floors in, we're doing the floors. And he goes, and the third year is when you buy the chandelier. And I've never thought about it like that.
That's
but
exactly what I was just saying.
Yeah.
And I've talked to Brad about this, but he spared me the analogy. He did not give me the nugget that he gave you. Again, going back to the great interviewer that you are. But in talking to him just on the sideline at a game, we were talking about this. And I just think it's so huge. And then once you have that, it's a lot easier to go shopping for. It's easier and it's more fun for everybody when you can go get the chandelier. But you can't start with the chandelier.
You cannot start with the chandelier. If you start with the chandelier is going to break because it's not going to have anything around it. It's just going to be hanging in the middle of a backyard, and someone's going to steal it. Hey, QB1. Well, actually, let's back up here. We can do quarterbacks, but the top of the 2025 draft. So we got teams here who want salvation and are looking for anything. Is this the year you prioritize quarterback if you're the Browns, the Giants? Like, is that kind of first pick, second pick, or do you say, hey, let's go out and get another foundational piece, and this might not be the year for quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty early on in it, but I would use intriguing. There's some intriguing guys, but I would tell you there is absolutely no conviction of saying 100% we get our quarterback right now.
Right.
I think, for me personally, I've got to do a lot more work on them. And I would imagine the teams it's not going to be one of those classes where you just like, okay, it's our year. We got to sort it out now. These 4 guys, 5 guys, we got to sort them out, get the right order, but we're going to get one. That's going to happen. I don't think you can have that type of conviction this year. I think you have to find out maybe one of these guys fits you, and you've got to do all your homework on it to get through it. But I mean, like, Cam Ward's fun. He's fun to watch, and there's some tools in there. It's intriguing. Shedeur Sanders, maybe not as twitched up as Cam Ward, maybe not quite as exciting or as fun, but he's pure. He's a pure, rhythm pocket passer who has enough of a lot of different skills. But there's no one trait that's gonna light you on fire and be super, super pumped up about. So I was thinking about this, and I think it was because I was in Atlanta on Sunday. And I was looking down there, and I almost was like, I had that, maybe I need to go find Terry and say, hey, doing a lot of homework on this class. I get it. I get it. Maybe you were just down the road a little bit. Yeah. And Michael Penix, from what I've seen of the guys I've studied this year, Michael Penix is more talented than this class. So, and we'll see, Kirk hasn't been playing well the last couple weeks. And we'll see when that, the keys to the car get handed over to Penix. Maybe it's still another year away, but that decision, as I've gotten deeper into this class, makes more sense.
I think Cam Ward, and this is not me being a homer, because Lord knows I sat in the dome with my 2-year-old the other day and had a really bad time. And in fact, I might be an anti-homer on that team right now. I'm very, very mad at them. But with Ward, someone said this to me a couple weeks ago, and I can't stop thinking about it. He's not Mahomes, but his flaws in college were Mahomes' flaws in college, right? And so you start to think about it, and I don't have an updated list, but I remember he's really only thrown 2 interceptions that were bad passes. There are 4, I think, that were either tips or him just throwing, you've seen it, throwing across his body. Yeah. The worst stuff you've ever seen in your entire life.
Arrogant throws.
The Duke one was unbelievable because there was a holding penalty. And I think he knew it was a holding penalty. And so there literally couldn't have been a positive play, and he threw it up anyway. And it's like, come on, all right, we got it. I think you maybe misunderstood what a free play was. Okay, like it can't be a free play on the other side. But the Duke one was awful, and the Cal one was awful. But it's just him trying to do too much, I think, because he knows the defense is bad. He's got to score 45 points to beat pretty much anybody with a pulse. And that was a very similar thing with Texas Tech, where Mahomes was pressing all the time because he knew what Big 12 football meant and he knew what Texas Tech football meant. So to me, I think his delivery, the way he gets the ball out quick, the way he sees the field, I think there's an arrogance there that goes beyond the throws. Like the throw I always go to is there's a throw against Cal where the ref did not see the 12th man on the field. I don't know if you saw this play. And he pointed to the 12th man after the snap, gets the ball, points to 12th man, makes sure the ref sees it, then just in rhythm throws to the tight end down the seam. And to me, and maybe I'm just my amateur eyes, but to me, you don't know that guy's going to be open right there unless you know exactly what all 11 defenders are doing. And just knowing like, all right, we'll do this here. And so that to me just shows, I think he got an advanced way of reading the field. It just seems very Mahomes-like to me. That's all.
Yeah, no, and I'm excited to go deeper. I haven't seen the Cal game. I've seen the early stuff, but
don't watch the pick six.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. I have not seen it yet. So looking at some of the words that I had when I was taking notes on them, backpedal, bounce, strike shows up a bunch. I've got that several times.
Yep.
I've got small window, big arm a bunch. Manipulate arm angles.
Yep.
He can tighten up his release. When I first started watching him, I got a little bit concerned just because he'd get real long.
Yeah.
But then when he needs to, he can shorten it up. He looks like there's like a Nerf element to it. There's like a backyard Nerf element to just however you want to throw a Nerf ball, and it just jumps right out of his hand. Some of the crossbody stuff, there's some arm arrogance stuff, which I don't really mind. I'd rather have somebody that I can rein in versus somebody I got to
coach him out of the crossbody type of stuff.
Yeah. But really, more than anything else, it's just drifting. If he can just get his feet in the ground, and that was Mahomes. I mean, I can see that similarity too, because Mahomes, that's all he did was his whole answer was, I know we can't block him, but I don't want to sit here and throw slants for 50 attempts a game. I want to push the ball down the field. God knows I cannot put my feet in the ground and throw it down the field. So my arm's so big, I'm just going to retreat. Buy time for my receivers to get down the field. And then I'm going to get a little bit more time because I'm just going to fade. I'm going to fade away and all arm it all the way out there. So there's a lot of tools there. And that's why, like, to me, and really him and Shedeur are the two that I've watched early season stuff on. Shedeur is not as twitched up and not as sudden in his movements as Cam is. But there's things I wish that Cam would do that Shedeur does, just in terms of, hey, take some of these layups. Like, don't take all of them, but there's a couple of them there. Like, just mix those in a little bit more. Every play does not have to be a freaking, a mailbox throw, 30 yards down the field. But it's fun. But it's fun to watch.
When you get to the Georgia Tech loss, you're going to be seeing a lot of that, not to spoil anything. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words. Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. Hey, Howie Roseman, it looks like he's built a great team again. You worked for Howie.
Oh, yeah.
The defensive backs, Cooper DeJean, Quinion Mitchell, like hitting on those guys, bringing in Fangio. It's a tough team. Jalen Carter finally... And Jalen Carter was good. It was a great trajectory, but now he's ragdolling centers and in huge games. Howie has impressed you how this year?
I'll tell you, Howie, the most impressive thing about Howie is a team builder is that he is constantly adapting. And I think more so than him adapting to what others have done, he's adapting without any evidence, and everybody else is then following what he's done and the path that he's taken. And he's been able to find value forever. And I've joked with him about this. In Baltimore, where I came from before I was in Philly, we placed a big emphasis on the spine of the team, in terms of right down the middle. And a big part of that was Ray Lewis as a middle linebacker. Howie's never spent picks or money on linebackers. The other thing, we had Jamal Lewis, who was a 2,000-yard rusher. Howie's never believed that you have to invest resources in running back. He's always been a line of scrimmage. Well, the offensive line and defensive line are both talented and deep. He goes out, spends, what I guess you could say was top of the market for Saquon, which has turned out to be a tremendous value. And then with Nakobe Dean, even though he wasn't a high pick, hit a home run on that one. Zach Bond in free agency, didn't have to pay him a ton of money, hit a home run on that one. So what used to be some holes in a roster that was stacked up front and even really good out on the perimeter, he spent on money and draft picks on receivers, DBs. All of a sudden now you look at it, you're like, okay, where's the hole at? Like they're elite at running back. The linebackers are playing as good as any tandem in the NFL, and you still are fantastic up front. You've got weapons on the outside. And the other thing I would give him credit for in this offseason is I don't think, who says you can't take more than one swing at a hole? Like you have your pass defense was the major issue in the offseason. So I just took Quinion Mitchell high. Well, guess what? This guy, Cooper DeJean's a top 25 player in this draft, and he's still out there. I'm gonna go get him. And I'm gonna just absolutely hammer that need. And then I think all the changeover at D coordinator they've had, it hasn't really been a great mix there of guys trying to run things that they aren't familiar with or trying to get a team that's played one way to adapt to a totally new style. He just gave the keys over to Vic and said, Vic, it's your defense. We have the trust in you. Just call it. And it was a very quick adjustment period, and they're playing lights out.
That's awesome. I have a big question for you. So I like to ask whenever someone's an expert at something. Obviously, there's like a whole community of internet scouts now, for lack of a better term. And they do draft work, and they do so much work. And there's so many great folks who are on Twitter breaking down stuff who could easily and maybe still work in NFL front offices one day, right? And they're just doing it. You've been inside of it. You know it. You've been to probably thousands of college games at this point, and NFL games and high school games, and you played it. If there was one piece of specific, you wave a wand, a specific thing that these internet draft guys could learn and understand before they start watching tape in for this cycle, which most of them probably already have, what would that be, DJ?
I think one of the major differences between what gets put out on like YouTube versus being in a personnel department. And trust me, I'm with you. I think it's great for the game that this many people are interested in it. I think there's some really smart people who do some great things in there. I would just say that the major difference with the personnel department and then what's on YouTube, it tends to be more coach scheme related. Whereas in the personnel department, that's not the case. And we'll even say like, hey, we've got coaches to coach. Our job is to evaluate the traits. We got to project. How does this project moving forward? How do they move? Their instincts, this, that, and the other. We don't get hung up on, I don't know what happened when the backside, was he in the right spot? I don't know what this versus this look. Shouldn't they have checked this, that? They're like, no, you don't know it. We can say that we have some familiarity, but we're not masters there, and we can't get inside their heads, and we can't pretend to know what he was taught or told. So let's evaluate what the physical tools look like. I've had a lot of conversations, and a lot of them with former quarterbacks, like NFL quarterbacks, who will get so frustrated of like, I don't understand versus this coverage, why he's not starting on the backside and working this combination. And I'm like, you're giving too much credit to all these coaches to assume that they're all on the same page and they all read out of the same menu. I don't know what the kid's being taught. I'm going to evaluate his skill set. I'm going to evaluate his decision-making. I'm going to try and get to know as much as I can about the person and learn, that side of him too, from a competitiveness standpoint, intelligence, work ethic, all those things on the scouting side of things. But we used to call them, when I was scouting, we call them like scheme scouts, because you'd be in the room sometimes with a former coach who had then just been given a laptop and said, go scout, and they didn't have any training. And they're sitting in there and they're obsessing over, why in the world would they add on with this rusher? And that doesn't he know? And I'm sitting here going like, I don't care. I just need to know if this linebacker can run well enough to be able to cover Alvin Kamara in our division out of the backfield. I want to see him move. So that's probably one of the biggest disconnects between those two.
I remember talking to a really good GM, like a top 10 GM last year, and we were talking about different things. And I was like, oh, he doesn't do this. And the guy said, scheme is a distraction. And I was like, what? Yeah. And he goes, scheme is a distraction because you just go, as you said, you go 5 different layers and you go, oh, he didn't do this because they were in coverage. It's like, no. Can he move? Can he tackle? Can he play? Like, don't give me, he did this and he would do this. Like that. At that point, you're projecting, and you don't want to be projecting.
Yeah. To me, attributes, decision-making, poise, those are things you can glean off of the video that don't really have as much to do with the scheme.
That's great. All right, we'll still tap into YouTube for all those draft nicks. Daniel Jeremiah, thank you so much, man, for coming on This Is Football.
Oh, you're the best, buddy. Great to see you.